Attention, duped masses!
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato.
Acid attacks, Cardinal cover-up, and another end of the world. Plus this day in history with a flight of the Super Fortress and our Song of the Day by Trevor Something on your Morning Monarchy for September 21st, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Welcome back to your morning broadcast brought to you by you. Streaming live, MediaMonarchy.com/listen Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 Pacific Time. News, music, and more. Again, all brought to you by you. Huge thanks. We've been doing this for 12 years and a week. MediaMonarchy.com/support's the place to go. Give us that support that we need for more independent, non-commercial alternative media, such as the latest episode of New World Next Week, which just hit the webs a couple hours ago. We'll talk about that towards the end of this episode. Watch out. I think it's probably time to swap out that XLR cable. It is Thursday, and again, Media Monarchy is generally for adults only, and each day of the week we focus on a different area of the news. Monday's world news, Tuesday's tech, Wednesday's health, and Thursday is the occult underbelly of the powers that shouldn't be. We got all your pedogate coverage. We've got all your powers that shouldn't be coverage. And yeah, Saturday's going to be another end of the world. Hashtag Holy Hexes is the day. And again, all the stories we're going to talk about, we tweeted out at the top of the episode, or rather an hour before we hit the air, so you can follow along. The bouncing ball, as I like to say. You can also find an invite to the tweets, to the chats, to all of it. MediaMonarchy.com. You can even listen to the show in the chat in Discord. So huge thanks to everybody hanging out in there. Our buddy Chef Jake, Mr. Empty, our buddy Kevin. Huge thanks. Let's glance at the breaking lamestream news before we dive into our Holy Hexes news. Insurers come out swinging against new GOP healthcare bill because, of course, it's the medical industrial complex. Maria strikes and Puerto Rico goes dark. I believe they're saying an entire countrywide power outage. Now it's down to the human interest stories out of the Washington Compost. Mexico anxiously awaits the fate of a 12-year-old schoolgirl after deadly earthquake. Trump says the United States will impose new sanctions on North Korea. SEC says it was a victim of computer hacking last year. That's generally how quick the powers that shouldn't be will admit when they've been hacked, usually an inside job. Hello, Equifax. And Oklahoma City police fatally shoot deaf man despite yells of, "He can't hear." Thanks, cops. Let's glance at our fact check so we can rub our couple of brain cells of critical thinking that the powers that shouldn't be think we have. Trump knocks Emmy ratings as worst ever, so says CBS. House Democrats did not introduce a bill to remove citizenship requirement for U.S. presidency. You go to PolitiFact for that. Actually, interesting video I tweeted out yesterday from the Associated Press of the new American citizen swearing-in ceremony. They basically had Trump saying, "Hey, welcome to America. It's yours now." And they talked to somebody, "I don't like that guy." Some Canadian lady. Meanwhile, other people actually from terrible police states like Israel. Like, dude, I love it. Glad to be here. Dollar Tree closing all stores. You gotta head to Snopes for that one. Prince Harry not pooped on by bird in Africa, despite report. You gotta go to Gossip Cop for that. In Europe, poll and Brexit. Will UK retain access to EU intelligence sharing? Does the Pope poop in the woods? I think you know the answer to that question. You go to the BBC if you need more on that. And we will have more on popes and mad poopers on this episode. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. This is your Morning Monarchy. It is Thursday. That's Holy Hexes Day. We, of course, always transition out of Food World Order, which is our Wednesday. And we'll do that by looking at a Swiss startup bottling fresh air from Switzerland to sell to residents of heavily polluted cities like those in China and India. According to the company alpineair.swiss, you can get .swiss now. The air is collected from various locations around the Swiss Alps and compressed into an aerosol can. It comes attached with a face mask to assist with breathing. A 7-liter can of air costs about 21 American bucks and contains enough air for over 120 breaths. 10 minutes. This product is for a population who live with terrible pollution every day, a pollution that may shorten their lives and cause debilitating health problems. One can of Swiss air is not the answer to their problems, but it is so nice to be able to breathe clean, fresh air, even for a little while. So said the company's CEO, Danny Wurr. He expects the new company to become a major world player in the new breathable air market. Confirming the first batch of orders has already been completed, he said the company's seeking investors to facilitate its rapid growth. And as typically, Friends in the chat, already on top of it. You already know the joke. You've already seen this before in the 1987 film by Mel Brooks called Spaceballs. And that's actually the GIF that RT uses. Money for nothing? Swiss startup sells bottled fresh alpine air to residents of polluted cities. And it does indeed have a GIF of Mel Brooks huffing Perry air. Meanwhile, I can see the breaking news red banner at the top of this page. The U.S.-led coalition vows to avoid incidents with Russian military in Syria. So we'll see how that goes. Now, I don't know if they can fluoridate that air. They're probably working on that. I know they've aerosolized some aluminum particulates, but that's for a whole other different operation. So that's the perfect way to transition out of Food World Order coverage and transition into our news of the strange. Hashtag holy hexes. And indeed, it does get darker from there. A woman with deep psychological problems was in custody in the French city of Marseille on Sunday after spraying 4 American students with acid and burning 2 in the face. The attack took place shortly after 11 a.m. on Sunday at the St. Charles station, where the 4 women were all preparing to board a train, and they're all 4 from Boston College.
4 Boston College students sprayed in the face with acid say they forgive their attacker, a spokesperson at the school said.
We're very fortunate. There could have been a very serious incident, but the girls were treated in a hospital in Marseille and have been released.
The women were studying abroad in Europe and were at a train station when they were randomly targeted.
French police ruled out terrorism as a motive. They're convinced that it's just a woman who suffers from mental illness, who is known to police, who sprayed them.
On Facebook, one student wrote in part, "I pray that the attacker would be healed from her mental illness." Some classmates on campus, concerned for their well-being, believe this isolated incident won't stop them from studying abroad.
I think it's still safe. It is scary, and that's a decision that, every student has to make with their family.
Our parents and even the faculty here at BC made a point to tell us to be aware of your surroundings, because obviously there's been a lot of stuff going on.
A 41-year-old woman was arrested in connection with the crime. The 4 students plan to continue studying abroad.
That's a good point brought up in the chat. We only ever hear the stories about, oh, I forgive them. We never hear those stories just like, fuck that guy twice. Although we might actually hear that, and we've heard it a little bit when we've been talking about, of course, all the Manson family critters. I've got more on that coming up for you in just a few moments. Acid attack took place at the Gare de Marseille St. Charles station Sunday. 4 American tourists. And they're all essentially 4 pretty white girls. I'd be interested to see the ethnic makeup of the attacker. It's not terrorism. It was just some angry other woman throwing acid on 4 cute, young, pretty 20-year-old college white American girls. So from canned air to acid attacks. That's the way we begin. Good God. Food World Order? Holy hexes? Let's head on back to Africa, where we've been following, the cannibalism cult stories. A man who was accused of beheading a woman and cannibalizing her. He's died in the hospital after being shot by police in South Africa. Efiwe Mapekula, 23, was shot in the arm and the leg and the stomach outside his home in Mount Frere, Brother Mountain, after officers arrived to find him eating the corpse of a woman. We're grabbing this from The Independent. Cannibal killer shot by police after refusing to stop eating woman he beheaded. Sound like the Causeway Cannibal down in Florida a couple years ago? It's the latest incident involving cannibalism in the Eastern Cape after 4 men were charged with raping, killing, and consuming parts of a woman near Durban last month that we reported for you. Durban, of course, shares its name with a highly potent strain of cannabis called Durban poison. Thanks, Tricky. Police say they arrived at the scene in Mount Frere last week to find Mapekula eating the flesh of Thembisa Masumpa, 35 years old, a woman who was known to him and who he allegedly beheaded after a family argument. Officers told local newspaper reporters the suspect ignored several warning shots designed to stop him before charging at the police with a knife after they opened fire. He was taken to a local hospital where he's also alleged to have attacked a female medic minutes after being admitted. Then he croaked 3 days later on 9/12. His mom, who first raised the alarm when she saw her son attacking Miss Masumpa as she tried to leave their home, told the Daily Dispatch, "I never raised a son like this. I never imagined this." Neighbors say Miss Masumpa worked at the home doing odd jobs and washing in the backyard when she was attacked by Mapakula. Local police spokeswoman said he killed her with a knife by cutting her throat. When the mother of the suspect saw what was happening, she rushed and called the police to the scene. When they arrived, the suspect was busy eating the flesh of the deceased. Police ordered him to stop and to hand himself over. He, shockingly, went berserk and stormed at them with a knife. Several warning shots were fired to deter him, but in vain. The mayor thinks it's drug and substance abuse. Neighbors think he's an introvert who dropped out of university and struggled with drug addiction. The two variations on a similar story. Spokesman for the local health department told Herald Live he was admitted on Saturday after he was transferred with gunshot wounds and needed emergency surgery. He unfortunately died in the early morning hours. Cannibal killer. Stacking them up in the holy hexes world. I've said before, and I want to be able to follow up on our stories much more often than usual. I saw the word awesome and it came out of my mouth. It feels like on Thursdays, it feels like on Holy Hexes Day. It's one of the days where we actually follow through and get updates and continually follow a story, whereas I suppose on other days, it's just crazy world news that happens. Oh, it's crazy technology things that happen. In some ways, it feels like Thursdays, Holy Hexes Day, we do continually look at a handful of stories that we want to continue to investigate, that we want to continue to expose, that we want to wonder about. I first heard about Slender Man, of course, when I used to produce Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis a couple years ago. That's how I learned about a lot of parapolitical, paranormal activity. A Wisconsin girl who admitted to participating in the stabbing of a classmate to please horror character Slender Man will avoid prison after a jury determined Friday that she was mentally ill at the time of the attack.
I've read the verdict, I've reviewed it, I'm satisfied that both questions are answered, and there are two dissenting jurors on each question. There are the same two dissenting jurors on each question. Court will read the verdict. We, the jury, find as follows. Question 1. At the time the crime was committed, did the defendant have a mental disease or defect? Answer is yes by 10 to no. If you've answered question 1 yes, then answer this question, question 2. As a result of the mental disease or defect, did the defendant lack substantial capacity to appreciate the wrongfulness of the conduct or to conform that conduct to the requirements of law? Answer yes, 10 in the square 10 for yes, 2 in the square for no, 2. I note that the answer, or the word yes, is circled in answer to each of the questions. I'm satisfied that the answer is yes to each of those questions. There are two dissenting jurors to each of the questions. They are the same jurors. I'm satisfied the verdict is consistent, proper. At this time, I'm going to have the jury polled. Our alternates, thank you for being so diligent and really so much on point with everything, too. We appreciate that totally.
That's kind of a reminder in a lot of ways, of course, that court cases are not like the wildly exciting movie versions or the Perry Mason style. It's very bureaucratic and very long and drawn out. And I know actually some of you, I think, are dealing with jury duty as we speak. Anissa Wire and Morgan Geyser lured classmate Peyton Lautner into the woods at a park in Waukesha, a Milwaukee suburb, in 2014. Geyser stabbed Lautner 19 times, while Wire urged her on. A passing bicyclist found Lautner, who barely survived her wounds. All three girls were 12 at the time. Both Wire and Geyser told detectives that they felt they had to kill Lautner to become Slender Man's proxies, or servants, and protect their families from the demon's wrath. The Lautner family said in a statement Friday they were disappointed with the outcome. The decision allows the assailant to petition the court every 6 months and request release into the community. Their decision also forces our family to relive this horrific crime every 6 months, wondering if they'll be released. The potential release of an assailant that methodically planned and executed an attack on which our little girl was stabbed 19 times puts the community and our family at risk. It's deeply disappointing. Or, as we were referencing earlier, fuck that guy twice. Wire, now 15, pleaded guilty to attempted second-degree intentional homicide in a deal with prosecutors in August, but she claims she was mentally ill during the attack and not responsible for her actions in a bid to be sent to a mental institution rather than a prison. A plea agreement before trial called for her to spend at least 3 years in a mental hospital if judged mentally ill and 10 years in prison if not. The jury's verdict came after some 11 hours of deliberation and about an hour after it appeared to reach a verdict in Wire's favor, only to see it rejected by Judge Michael Boren. Though that first verdict wasn't read in court, defense attorney Maura McMahon said 10 of 12 jurors, the minimum required by law, voted Wire was mentally ill. On a second question that jurors had to decide whether she was criminally responsible for her actions, 10 jurors voted that she was not. But it wasn't the same 10 on both questions, according to McMahon, but the judge ordered the jury to resume deliberations. In closing arguments, McMahon told the jury that Wire was lonely, depressed, and descended into madness that warranted a mental hospital rather than prison. McMahon said Wire's unhappiness stemmed from her divorce, and she latched on to Geyser. I believe they probably mean her parents' divorce, not the 12-year-old girl's divorce. Together, they became obsessed with Slender Man, developing a condition called shared delusional disorder. Wire believed Slender Man could read her mind as well as teleport and would kill her or her family if she talked about him. I suppose the question, speaking of the parents, suppose they're nowhere to be found, nowhere around. And that's how people find different families. That's how you find cult-like families. A Los Angeles Superior Court judge has denied the release of hours of recorded interviews with one of the convicted killers in Charles Manson's cult. We referenced this briefly as the latest news last week of Leslie Van Houten. The taped conversations between Charles Tex Watson and his late attorney were made in 1969, shortly after Watson and other Manson acolytes were arrested. Observers of the case have long viewed the recordings as an unparalleled window into the barbarous slayings carried out by Manson and his so-called family. The recordings have never been made public, and the LAPD said it only recently obtained them, if we are to believe the Los Angeles Police Department. An attorney for Leslie Van Houten, who was convicted of killing Rosemary and Lino LaBianca, has been trying to unseal the Watson interviews as part of Van Houten's bid for parole. Every shred of evidence in the Manson case is public record except those tapes, said Rich Pfeiffer, Van Houten's attorney. They are the most reliable description of what happened. But the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office has fought the tape's release, saying that Van Houten can't obtain evidence after her conviction because she does not face a sentence of death or life without parole. Prosecutors also say Van Houten, 68, could get the evidence that would have been available only at the time of her trial. Because the tapes were protected by attorney-client privilege, then Van Houten would not have had access to them. In his ruling 2 days ago, Los Angeles Superior Court Judge William C. Ryan agreed with prosecutors, adding that after reviewing a 326-page transcript, he did not find the content of the tapes relevant. Even if Van Houten was entitled to the Tex Watson interview tapes, which is capitalized, Tex Watson interview tapes, they would add nothing not already well known, Ryan said. Watson does talk about in several places how Charles Manson had a powerful influence over him and other members of the Manson family, but that information is also very well known. Pfeiffer said he planned to appeal the ruling and said in court papers that the tapes could help Governor Jerry Brown, whose aura smiles and never frowns, make a more informed decision as he weighs whether to release Van Houten, who was again granted parole from prison, as we reported for you last week. The jury, the parole board, has granted her parole. What could happen, as happened the previous time they granted Van Houten parole, is that actually Jerry Brown said, So we're waiting to see what he's going to say this time. The district attorney's office declined to comment, of course, on the judge's ruling. The DA's office had claimed that the tapes would compromise ongoing investigations. Or why didn't you guys just use national security? But an LAPD detective told the judge that no open investigations would be undermined by the tape's release, stating the obvious. Unless you guys have got some just barn-burning stuff you're working on behind the scenes. Last week, a panel of state commissioners granted Leslie Van Houten parole. The panel's decision is undergoing a legal review, and in about 4 months, the governor will have to decide whether to uphold, reverse, or modify the parole decision. Jerry could also send the decision to a full review by the full board of state parole commissioners. Punt it. Just send it back to them. As we see often. Van Houten was not part of the Manson followers who, on August 9th, 1969, stormed the Benedict Canyon home shared by pregnant actress Sharon Tate, 26, and her movie director husband Roman Polanski, who was not home at the time. He was shooting a movie about governments using mind control to create assassin animals called Day of the Dolphin. As ridiculous as that sounds. Tate and 4 others were stabbed and shot to death that night. Manson, now 82 years old, and other acolytes involved in the slayings, and it's the second use of the word acolytes, they're all still behind bars. Watson and Patricia Krenwinkel each have been denied parole several times. Susan Atkins, who was denied parole 13 times, died in prison back in 2009. So that's the story we will continue to follow for you, as we've essentially followed the Manson case from the very beginning. I've often noted, I think, probably one of the best and most important interviews I ever did was with Peter Levenda, the author of the Sinister Forces trilogy, which essentially his thesis is that America is a giant stolen haunted house where we built military bases and prison on top of native burial grounds. And I know anytime I mention Peter Levenda, there will of course always be people in the chat and say, that guy's an agent. He wrote the Necronomicon. His name's Simon. And that's the case in a lot of situations. You don't know exactly who's doing what. And the whole conspiracy world has been spinning for quite some time. Quite some time. This is also the part where my music bed has croaked out and ran out of battery power. Maybe it just gives a little bit extra bit of spooky starkness to this morning monarchy. It is Thursday, September 21st. Last day of summer, my fiends. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com, broadcasting live, of course, always from the Peak Portland studios up here in Portland, Oregon. Streaming live at MediaMonarchy.com/listen. So it's only a hop, skip, and a jump, really, to go from Manson, of course, to the Oswalds. It's a new show coming out this fall, and actually, we mentioned this case that I'm going to mention for you right here on that brand new episode of New World Next Week. Again, the latest episode of the long-running popular underground news series just hit the webs maybe a couple hours ago. Countless concerned individuals are still searching for answers surrounding the mysterious death of the 35th President of the United States, John Fitzgerald Kennedy. The official narrative that a lone former Marine named Harvey Oswald assassinated him is widely disputed. All available documents from all government entities are required by the Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, which was brought into the world because the film from Oliver Stone pretty much rattled everybody's cages, and actually Bill Clinton said, okay, I'll make a new Records Act that said they were all to be released October 26th, 2017, 25 years after Billy Boy wrote that. But if history repeats itself, the criminals in action, the Cocaine Import Agency, the Central Intelligence Agency, may not release an entire volume of documents on Oswald, known as Volume 5. As Sputnik reports, the release in July of 3,810 CIA and FBI documents on the assassination by the AARB, Assassination Records Review Board, threw up a number of revelations that JFK researchers have hungrily devoured and enthusiastically publicized. For instance, the mayor of Dallas at the time of Kennedy's assassination, Earl Cabell, was a CIA asset in the 1950s, and his brother Charles, a high-ranking CIA official until 1962. The release in October has been highly anticipated by those seeking answers. However, thanks to a deliberate fudging or a conveniently timed clerical error, an entire volume may never see the light of day. Inside Langley Air Force Base's CIA headquarters is an office known as the Office of Security. They maintain their own top-secret archive known as the Office of Security Archival Holdings, and is the separate archive from the agency's more frequently used facility located in Alexandria, known as the Agency Archival Record Center. As late as 1977, the entire 7-volume collection of documents was intact, having been checked out by Russ Holmes in the Office of the General Counsel, and noted the 7-volume series was altogether not missing any volumes. But when the CIA was asked to turn over the volume of documents on Oswald, the hitman in the assassination, it seems the agency stonewalled a bit. Remember, like we talked about earlier this week? Delay, delay, delay. Like a shell game, according to independent investigator Malcolm Blunt. He described the stonewalling as this huge search by the CIA did not surface Oswald's security files, and the Assassination Records Review Board remained uninformed about their existence. Not until 1997, when an ARRB staffer stumbled across evidence that 2 previous congressional investigations had access to these files, did the CIA discover them. The AARB eventually received the 7-volume set of documents on Oswald in 98, but staffers quickly realized number 5's missing. An agency explanation was offered that 5 could have been consolidated into Volume 4, or 6 even. Eventually, the agency concluded, according to Blunt, Volume 5 of Oswald's security file may have never existed. So, entire volume of CIA files on Lee Harvey Oswald set to be released October 26th, coming very soon, a month and a couple of days, might not really get released. What a surprise. You're listening to The Morning Monarchy for Thursday, September 21st, 2017. I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. I love in so many ways, and this is why we always at the end of the episode do This Day in History, to have these stories together. And again, these are just the 12 or 15 or so stories I've picked today from hashtag Holy Hexes to tell the story of the day, if you will. I find it fascinating that we can tell stories from the past, from 30, 40, 50 years ago, the Manson family, the assassinations. And we can bring it to this present day as we see things shaking. Let's head over to Iceland, shall we? Where they're facing its second snap election in about a year after the Independence Party-led government collapsed, over a scandal involving grants of clemency to convicted child molesters.
Iceland's Prime Minister on Friday called for a snap parliamentary election after the party Bright Future in the ruling coalition quit the government, citing reasons of breach of trust after Prime Minister Rajani's party allegedly tried to cover up a scandal involving his father. Now, the scandal revolves around a letter written by his father to help an old friend in getting his criminal record expunged after he was convicted of sexual offences against children. The Prime Minister's father, Mr. Benedict, also confirmed on Friday that he had signed a letter supporting his friend's application to have his honour restored in the procedure that effectively erases a criminal record. The Bright Future party said in a statement that the board of Bright Future has decided to terminate cooperation with the government of the Prime Minister, and the reason for the split is a serious breach of trust within the government, it said. The outgoing government will be the shortest living in Iceland's history. The previous government was overthrown, remember, by the Panama Papers scandal verdict over offshore tax havens, and the news now has knocked more than 1% of the value of the Icelandic crown against the euro and the dollar. The country's banking system has been wrecked by their economy nearly a decade ago, and the country is facing a second snap election in just less than a year. It is ultimately up to President of the country, whom the Prime Minister will meet on Saturday to make the decision of a new election.
Prime Minister Bjarni Benediktsson on Saturday called for elections to be held on November 4th in a live broadcast from the president's residence. The move comes after he was abandoned by his coalition partners, the 4-lawmaker Bright Future and the Reform Party, which has 8 legislators. Benediktsson said in an interview on Friday that he would seek to continue as party leader and that he believes the independents can gain strength in an election. There's a lot of turbulence at the moment, but I think when the dust settles, people will see there's no corruption, there's no hiding of evidence. The coalition that collapsed had only a 1-seat majority in parliament and was cobbled together earlier this year after long negotiations. Iceland's previous government unraveled when Prime Minister Sigmundur David Gunnlaugsson became the most high-profile casualty of the so-called Panama Papers. The premier said on Friday that he was shocked to hear of his father's letter, never tried to conceal anything, and was never part of the decision process in the cases in the question. Iceland's Jimmy Savile case. Our prime minister, who was in the Panama Papers, has hidden for 10 months his father's support for a pedophile's clemency. Smerry McCarthy, a Pirate Party member of Parliament, said on Twitter, the turmoil has surfaced just as the coalition was presenting the budget to Parliament and meetings were canceled in the legislature on Friday. From here to there and all around the world, pedogate knows no bounds, knows no barriers, knows no borders. So let's dive into all the other hashtag pedogate coverage. French Cardinal Philippe Barbarin. I like how he has barber in his name, as in barbarism. Remember, the Smith said barbarism begins at home. French Cardinal Philippe Barbarin and a senior Vatican official were on Tuesday ordered to stand trial for allegedly covering up for a pedophile priest accused of abusing several Boy Scouts in Lyon in the 1980s. The most senior French Catholic official to be tried for failing to report a predator priest will go on trial on April 4th. 4-4 next year, along with 6 co-defendants, a court in Lyon said. Barberin, who is Archbishop of Lyon, is accused of having shielded priest Bernard Preynat. I like that he has the word pray in his name. Preynat. Barberin shielded Preynat from claims of abuse involving scouts in his Lyon parish. The head of the Vatican's powerful Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, Spanish Archbishop Francisco Ladaria Ferrar, is accused of complicity in the alleged cover-up. In correspondence with Barberin about the priest, the Vatican's number 3 had advised the Cardinal to take necessary disciplinary measures while avoiding public scandal, seen as a warning to keep quiet about the abuse. The affair came to light in 2014 when one of the former scouts reported Preynat to the church and demanded he be sacked. 66-year-old Barberin, one of the French church's most prominent figures, left him in his post for several more months. In 2016, Preynat was charged with statutory rape and sexual assault, but an investigation into Barberin's silence on the issue was dropped for lack of evidence, which silence will lead to. 10 people who claim to have been abused by Preynat pressed their case and succeeded in having it reopened. If convicted of failing to report the abuse, he risks up to 3 years in prison and a fine of 54,000 American fiat dollars. The 4 other defendants in the case are the Archbishop of the Southwestern Diocese of Auch, A-U-C-H, and a bishop from the central city of Nevers, both of whom formerly served in Lyon, as well as Barberin's former chief of staff and Preynat's former direct superior. From top to bottom, each level of their corner of the pyramid, delay, cover up, and abuse. And we say it's the same thing essentially in your corrupt organized religions, just as it is in your corrupt organized sports. Jeffrey Sandusky, the son, I believe the adopted son, of convicted sex abuser and former Penn State football coach Jerry Sandusky, pleaded guilty Friday to all 14 counts of child sexual abuse against him. The Center Country District Attorney's Office said the younger Sandusky, 41, entered the guilty pleas a week before his trial was scheduled to begin. The 14 counts included soliciting sex from a child younger than 16 and soliciting child pornography. According to the District Attorney's Office, Sandusky will become a Tier 3 sex offender, the highest level in Pennsylvania. The charges involve incidents with 2 girls. That's interesting. One in 2013 and one in 2016. The crimes were uncovered late last year when a girl told her father that Sandusky had texted her repeatedly asking her to send him naked photos. The father contacted the police, and during the investigation, police discovered another girl, known as victim number 2, who said Sandusky had asked her to engage in oral sex with him years before. Both victims say Sandusky tried to use different excuses to try to get them to participate, saying at one point that he had studied medicine, and another time that he believed that victim number 1 had shared a nude photo with her boyfriend and he wanted to see it.
A horrific story. Jeffrey Sandusky, the son of convicted sex abuser Jerry Sandusky, has been arrested on child sexual abuse charges. That's according to court documents filed today in Pennsylvania. Let's get right to CNN's Sarah Ganim. Sarah, there were felony and misdemeanor charges filed. What do we know about what law enforcement is alleging?
Jake, there are 14 charges against Jeffrey Sandusky involving 2 girls. They happened several years apart. The charges were uncovered when one of the girls told her father that Sandusky had texted her repeatedly asking her to send him naked photos. The father contacted police. The girl's father contacted police. And in the course of the investigation, the police discovered another girl known as victim number 2 in the criminal complaint who said that Jeffrey Sandusky asked her to engage in oral sex with him years before, back in 2013. Both victims say Sandusky tried to use different excuses to get them to participate, saying at one point that he had studied medicine, and another time that he believed one of the victims had shared a nude photo of herself with her boyfriend and he wanted to see it. Around the same time that this was happening, Jeffrey Sandusky was publicly defending his father on child rape charges that he was facing, appearing on a video on YouTube with his mother. Listen to what he said.
Knowing my father's innocent and some of the things that are brought up, hopefully they're taken and actually people will actually listen to and take it to heart.
Jeffrey is one of 6 adopted children of Jerry Sandusky. Of course, Sandusky is the former Penn State football coach who is serving a 30-year sentence for molesting 10 different boys. 30 men in total have settled lawsuits with Penn State University over sex abuse claims.
Okay, glad to get that confirmation there. I believe that he was the adopted son. 6 adopted kids. Whether or not you gave birth to that fruit or not, it still came off your tree and the fruit didn't fall very far. Continuing to look at holy hexes. A man who won a $338 million Powerball jackpot was charged yesterday with sexually assaulting a child. Pedro Quezada was charged with sexual assault and endangering the welfare of a child. Passaic County prosecutor Camelia Valdez said the child was between 11 and 14 when the assaults occurred. Quezada, who's 49, was scheduled to make his initial court appearance Wednesday afternoon. He could face up to 20 years if convicted. His attorney, of course, didn't return a phone call. Valdez, the prosecutor, said there does not appear to be any other victims. Quezada, who moved to the U.S. from the Dominican Republic about 30 years ago, worked 15-hour days at his bodega in Passaic. Before winning the lottery in 2013, he took the lump $152 million payout, of course, after the thefts. My life has changed. It will not change my heart. Quezada of Wayne, New Jersey, became embroiled in legal matters after his big win. He was accused of reneging on a promise to pay the rent of all his neighbors on his block in the days after he won the jackpot. He was also sued by a contractor who claimed he didn't pay for renovations to a home that he bought in Clifton, New Jersey. So let's head from New Jersey as we go to the land down under. Our friend Nathan's been giving us a lot of news from down under. Victims of sexual abuse by Catholic clergy are demanding that a memorial plaque depicting a convicted offender be removed from St. Mary's Cathedral in Hobart. This is, again, in Australia. The plaque on the external wall of the cathedral honors former Archbishop Sir Guilford Young and depicts the late Monsignor Philip Green. In 2004, Green pleaded guilty to assaulting a former altar boy and was given a 3-month suspended jail term. Julian Punch, a prominent former Hobart priest, also claimed he was assaulted by the former Monsignor. In his new autobiography, Gay with God, Julian Punch claimed the late Monsignor assaulted him when he was a student at the Corpus Christi College in Mount Waverley in Melbourne in 1968. Mr. Punch said the plaque, which shows Green with children, must be removed. So this picture is included, of course, it'll be included in the show notes. You can see it in the tweets. And no, it's not the guy in the middle. It's not the priest in the middle with his hands on little kids' heads, pushing them towards his crotch. It's the guy on the far left. He's standing by watching. But they say the worst of the Catholic sexual abuse scandal may be over in Australia, but the crisis is likely to hit the church in Asia, Africa, and parts of Europe within a decade, a new report has warned. The RMIT study, Child Sexual Abuse in the Catholic Church, has for the first time compiled the findings of 26 royal commissions, police investigations, judicial probes, government inquiries, church studies, and academic research from around the world since 1985. It warns the gravest potential for future abuse of children and teenagers lies in the estimated 9,600 orphanages the churches still run, including 2,600 in India and 1,600 in Italy. The worst is still to come. Back here in the States, Warren Jeff's polygamous bishop brother Lyle has pled guilty to running a multi-million-dollar food stamp fraud scheme and escaping from prison after he removed his ankle monitor and spent a year on the run. We followed this story for you in this past year. Lyle Jeffs, 57, pleaded guilty to escaping from home confinement and being involved in a multi-million-dollar food stamp fraud scheme. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a fascinating classic story. Not a lot of fugitives on the run in 2017. In another major development, the chairperson of Dara Management Committee, Vipassana, has gone into hiding, fearing arrest by police. On the other hand, Dara Chief Gurmeet Ram Rahim has given his nod for appointment of his son, Jasmeet, as the caretaker of his sect. We've been following the cult leader, rock star, movie star, goes to prison for 20 years for rape story in India. Now he's essentially still running his empire from behind bars. Now, I don't know what you've got on deck for this weekend, but it is my lovely wife's birthday this Saturday, September 23rd. But, I was going to plan some stuff, but, why bother? Because it's going to be the end of the world again. Christian numerologists claim that the world will end on Saturday, this coming Saturday. Mark your calendars, September 23rd, 2017, as they believe a planet will collide with Earth. Crap. According to Christian numerologist David Mead, verses in Luke 21:25-26 is the sign that recent events, of course, such as the solar eclipse and Hurricane Harvey, are signs of the apocalypse. Luke, book 21, verse 25. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what's coming on for the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. September 23rd is a date that was pinpointed using codes from the Bible, as well as a date marker in the pyramids of Giza in Egypt. Meads built his theory, which is viewed with a widely skeptical lens, on the so-called Planet X, aka Nibiru, which he believes will pass Earth on September 23rd, causing volcanic eruptions, maybe like the supervolcanoes near North Korea that we talked about yesterday, tsunamis and earthquakes. Need Another 7 astronauts has repeatedly said Planet X is, of course, a hoax. Our last few stories here on your Holy Hexes, I think we've gotten through the darkest things, and now we'll transition a little bit into our Friday coverage, and that's when we get into the entertainment industrial complex. But there's not much more entertaining, of course, than in Colorado Springs, on the loose, the Mad Pooper.
We call her the Mad Pooper of Pine Creek.
Kathy Buddy and her family have had enough.
And it's not like it's private. People can see you. I mean, we're seeing her, so.
Pants around ankles, in broad daylight, her kids saw it happen first.
They came screaming, you know, you're not going to believe this. They're like crying. It's like, what? And they're like, there's a lady taking a poop. And so I come outside, it's like, oh dear goodness. And so I was like, are you serious? Are you really taking a poop right here in front of my kids? And she's like, yeah, sorry.
Kathy says if that was it, there wouldn't be a problem.
And so I thought for sure she's mortified. It was an accident. She'll go get a dog bag, come back, clean it up, you know, and never run here ever again. Not the case.
Kathy says the runner knows what she's doing and comes with napkins in her pockets.
There's a bathroom across the street right here. Our park has porta potties. There's a gas station right here.
She's even working on an embarrassing smear campaign, posting this sign to get her to cut the, well, you know.
Quick, because it's disgusting. I mean, bottom line is it's disgusting.
Officers have asked Kathy to snap some pictures of the runner and get the word out, hoping she will stop before indecent exposure and public defecation charges.
It's just not a natural thing we would do in our society to drop your trouser and relieve yourself right there when you know there's people around, especially.
Well, you guys haven't come to Portland then. Jogger nicknamed the Mad Pooper, wanted for defecating in front yards, and I know in some ways it kind of, well, yeah, that makes me kind of want to go take a poop in her yard too. But when it comes to faith, Elizabeth Moss would rather remain private. In a new sit-down with Today's Willie Geist, the 35-year-old actress talks about her critically acclaimed television roles over the years, including Peggy Olson on Mad Men, and most recently, Offred on The Handmaid's Tale. She just won all kinds of awards for it, I believe, on the Emmy Sunday night. Moss was raised in the Church of Scientology, and when asked if she's ever felt a need to explain or defend her faith to fans, Moss shares that she would rather keep those discussions personal. I'm always happy to have a personal conversation with somebody off the record, but in this kind of scenario, no, she says, of talking about her Scientology faith on camera. When Geist comments that it doesn't seem like the controversial religion has affected her success in Hollywood, I feel I've done okay, she laughs. Elizabeth Moss says Scientology hasn't impacted her success in Hollywood. Yeah, I wonder if it almost could be, what's the word, boon? Also funny photos from years past of Leah Remini and Elizabeth Moss on the red carpet. All kinds of kabuki theater, and in my ongoing coverage of daily updates on Narcos, here's today's. Organized crime members are believed to be responsible for the murder in Mexico of a producer for the Netflix series Narcos. The producer traveled to Mexico to search for shooting locations for the upcoming season. The fourth season of the show is reported to provide an inside look at the rise of Mexican drug cartels.
Carlos Munoz Portal, a location scout for the Netflix show Narcos, was found shot to death in Mexico. Munoz and his bullet-ridden car were found in a secluded area in San Bartolo Octopan, near the borders of Hidalgo state, which is believed to have the highest murder rate in the country. According to Variety, there were 182 homicide cases in the month of July alone. That number represents a ratio of 12 for every 100,000 inhabitants. Munoz's body was discovered just hours after he was headed to the state of Mexico to take production photographs for season 4 of Narcos. Munoz was in Mexico at the time scouting locations for season 4 of the Netflix show, which will explore the origins of the Juarez cartel. Netflix released a statement following the discovery of the murder. We are aware of the passing of Carlos Munoz Portal, a well-respected location scout, and send our condolences to his family. The facts surrounding his death are still unknown as authorities continue to investigate. Munoz's death has led to Netflix mulling over the idea of continuing to film in Mexico or have production move back to Colombia where it initially started. Munoz, who worked for the production company Red Rum, based in Mexico City, has worked in the film industry for over a decade. The authorities are continuing to gather information. However, a spokesperson for the Attorney General of the state of Mexico said there are no witnesses at this time.
God, what a shock. I can't believe that people involved with the production company Red Rum would get murdered. Carlos Munoz Portal, or Portal, traveled to the country to search for shooting locations in the state of Mexico, which is located near the border with Hidalgo. Officials found his body inside his vehicle. The film company issued a short statement acknowledging the filmmaker's passing, claiming the case was still under investigation. American-made, Narcos. There is a lot of limited hangout theater going on. And we'll continue to break it down for you. Hey, we also got that latest episode of New World next week. Government sues citizens for requesting information. If you're a follower of Your Morning Monarchy, you know we already talked about that story earlier this week, although I think it was good enough to bring to the bigger audience at New World next week. So we not only talk about governments suing people seeking information, we of course also talk about Theresa May and all the bloviating and grandstanding at the UN General Assembly, and of course the not surprising calls for FANG to be regulated. We also have a pretty blockbuster report on fluoride. That and so much more on the latest episode of New World next week, which is up on the webs. If you haven't had the chance to check it out, I'll of course be playing the audio a little bit later on our stream. I'm so stoked to play our song of the day today by indie artist Trevor Something. I'll tell you a little bit more about it in just a few minutes. I've actually been sitting on it for a couple of weeks. However, let's look at this day in history. Oh my goodness, September 21st, 1776, part of New York City is burned shortly after being occupied by British forces. September 21st, 1937, as we pretty much quickly jump to the 20th century and beyond, J.R.R. Tolkien's Hobbit was published on this day in 1937. September 21st, 1938, the Great Hurricane of 1938 makes landfall on Long Island and in New York. Death toll is estimated to be between 500 and 700 people. So when we're thinking about the asteroids and the catastrophic events, oh, you mean the ones that happen constantly this time of year? Yeah. On this day in 1942, the U.S. B-29 Superfortress makes its debut flight in Seattle, Washington. It was the largest bomber used in the war by any nation.
This is it. This is the B-29, the plane you've been waiting for. And it was worth waiting for. It's the biggest, fastest, mightiest heavy bomber in the world. It can travel farther and higher than anything else on wings. It has a pressurized cabin, permitting high-altitude flight without oxygen masks. It has 5 remotely controlled, electrically driven turrets, each carrying twin 50s, with a 20-millimeter cannon added to the turret in the tail. Yes, the B-29 is everything you've been promised. And the pilot who flies one has an enviable job. Important, glamorous, and tough. Here's a B-29 pilot. He's measuring the distance between pin centers on the left landing gear. This part of the job isn't so glamorous. But it's the pilot's responsibility to make sure that everything on this biggest bomber in the world works properly. If you were a B-29 pilot, Here's exactly what you'd have to do before an operational flight. Check the nose wheel. See that the tires are inflated to 45 to 50 pounds per square inch. While measuring the pressure, look over the tires for general condition also. Watch out especially for cuts or signs of serious wear. One of the ground crew will replace the dust covers, but you're still responsible for his work. All right, we're back where we were before. Tell the bombardier to come forward and open the bomb bay doors. The doors should always be kept open when the ship is standing still to prevent the accumulation of gas fumes. Next, turn off all the switches. Then you can get rid of some of your equipment that remains inside the ship and climb out for the after-flight inspection. Yes, you start with an inspection and finish with an inspection. If there was anything wrong, now is the time to find out about it. And now is the time to correct it. Yes, this is the airplane that you've been promised. Now it's up to you to weld this airplane and its crew into a single, irresistible instrument of destruction. That can be your promise to us.
Your duty is clear: to build and maintain those robots. Now, that's actually not a newsreel bit. That's a training video from, of course, your fiends in the United States military. That's actually a 40-minute training video. It's like the most mundane thing you could imagine. However, I edited together the interesting intro moment and the interesting outro moment. And yes, bonus points for noticing the open the bomb bay doors part. Continuing to look at this day in history, September 21st, and also, that's extra points also, if you've noted. That's our fourth day this week of covering Space War news as our This Day in History focus note. Hopefully we can make it 5 out of 5 for tomorrow. Continuing, September 21st, 1964, the North American XB-70 Valkyrie, the world's first Mach 3 bomber, makes its maiden flight from Palmdale, California. That was our runner-up for our This Day in History focus. September 21st, 1965, the Gambia, Maldives, and Singapore are admitted as members of the United Nations. September 21st, 1971, Bahrain, Bhutan, and Qatar joined the United Nations. September 21st, 1972, Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos signs Proclamation number 1081, placing the entire country under martial law and marking the beginning of his authoritarian rule. Is there anything similar going on in the Philippines right now? Might have to follow Media Monarchy for that. An interesting part of parapolitical history, September 21st, 1976, Orlando Letelier is assassinated in downtown Washington, D.C. He is a member of the Chilean socialist government of Salvador Allende, overthrown in 73 by Pinochet. Sounds like a little bit of cleanup work by the CIA done in downtown D.C. Just dead. September 21st, 1981, Sandra Day O'Connor is unanimously approved by the U.S. Senate as the first female Supreme Court justice. September 21st, 1991, Armenia gains independence from the Soviet Union. And September 21st, 1996, the Defense of Marriage Act, DOMA, if you nasty, passes the Congress critters in a vote of 342 to 67. The law prohibited federal recognition of same-sex marriage while allowing states to adopt any marital definition of their choice. Interesting. States' rights. We'll have to look into that. Sounds interesting. September 21st, 2001, America, a tribute to heroes, is broadcast by over 35 propaganda networks and cable channels, raising over $200 million for the victims of 9/11. That same day, increased racial tensions in Peterborough, England following 9/11 result in the murder of white guy Ross Parker by a gang of 10 Muslims in a racially motivated attack. September 21st, 2003, the Galileo probe is terminated by sending it into Jupiter. Do you see the repeating, rhyming bits of history each and every day? Nothing new under the sun, as they say. September 21st, 2013, Al-Shabaab Islamic militants attack the Westgate shopping mall in Nairobi, Kenya, killing 67 in another massive televised, headlined, marquee 24/7 balls-to-the-walls news coverage event. Published in Media Monarchy a decade ago today, Mystery trades were profit scam for fearmongers. Financial analysts have slammed the so-called bin Laden trades as part of a fear-mongering scam that was used to chill confidence in the stock market and enable insiders to reap huge payouts after 9/11. But don't worry, the stock market, that's just a big red herring, right? 10,000 CCTV cameras, 80% of crime unsolved. That's what happens in London, and that's a decade ago. Again, putting to the lie that more cameras, more protections, more surveillance, it'll keep you safe. And finally, the third story published in Media Monarchy a decade ago today, 2 Russian strategic bombers fly along Alaska and Canada coasts. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Holy moly, look at the birthdays today. September 21st, H.G. Wells. Famed drummer band leader Papa Jack Lane. It's also famed animator Chuck Jones, the late great Larry Hagman, the late even greater Leonard Cohen. It's also Diane Reeves' birthday. CIA criminal James Woolsey Jr. born on this day. Actress Fannie Flagg, Jerry Bruckheimer. Original Eagle Don Felder. Oh, it's social justice warrior and author Stephen King. It's also Bill Murray's birthday. David Gregory from XTC. Shinzo Abe from Japan. It's also Phil Filthy Animal Taylor's birthday. Late great from Motorhead. Ethan Cohen of the Coen Brothers, Mark Levin, controversial fake conservative talk show host, Kevin Rudd from Australia, Simon Mayo, movie reviews with Kermode. It's also Dave Cut It Out Coulier's birthday, Nancy Travis, who for some reason came to my store a couple years ago at the grocery store. I'm not sure if she's up here in the Pacific Northwest or if she was just doing some film work. It's also Rob Morrow's birthday, Cheryl Hines, Faith Hill, Ricky Lake, Samantha Power, the powers that shouldn't be. Luke Wilson, Liam Gallagher. I've got a hilarious clip of Liam Gallagher making tea that I'll play for you tomorrow. It's also Vanessa Grigoriadis, who I believe we just mentioned this past week. She's an author and journalist. I can't remember the story, though. Somebody can help me out with that. Vanessa Grigoriadis. It's also Nicole Richie, Lindsay Sterling, and Jason Derulo's birthday. Now, super excited as we wrap up this episode. Couple of months ago, I got an unsolicited package in the mail, in the post office box. And again, that's another way that you can give your support. P.O. Box 12182, Portland, Oregon 97212. And again, you can find all that at MediaMonarchy.com/support, just like you can find the PayPal and the Patreon and the Bitcoin. I got a package in from In Your Brain LLC, a record label. And inside was the new album from Trevor Something. It's called Die With You, and it's got skeletons on the cover, and it basically looked like a metal record, and it wouldn't be the first time that underground metal had sent their latest records to Media Monarchy, like our friends of Archaic Audio over on the East Coast, Mountain God, and others. Slowly but surely, I dug this record more and more, and it hits me just right in my little synthwave heart. So here's the interesting part. I put our new music producer, Sean Cathcart, on the case to be like, dude, who sent this record? I'd never heard of them, so I didn't ask for it. Sean did some sleuthing, and it basically looks like Trevor Something is the same guy that runs the record label is the same guy that does everything. And it's possible Trevor Something is a giant fan of Media Monarchy. If indeed that is true, huge thanks, and I'm glad to turn around and share Suicide from Trevor Something as our song of the day today, a very holy hex's way to wrap up your morning monarchy. It is Thursday, September 21st, 2017, and I'm James Evan Pilato from MediaMonarchy.com. Again, thanking you so much for taking part and your support. And reminding you, as always, like Jello Biafra says, don't hate the media, become the media. Take care.
It's like without you in my life. 'Cause I can't live without your love, without your love. Can't live without your love, without your love. Maybe I could suicide. 'Cause I can't live without your love, without your love. Can't live without your love, without your love.
You're listening to Media Monarchy with James Evan Pilato. Since 2005, Media Monarchy has covered the real news about politics, health, technology and the occult, all remixed with music and media that matters. Go to MediaMonarchy.com/support and become a monthly subscriber so you can help keep independent, non-commercial, alternative media going and growing. Thanks.